Just because you're paranoid, Huey, doesn't mean we're not out to get you.
Do you think we can do this?
Later in the week.
December 2nd, 1 p.m., Parabolic Unit B.
Let me tell you something about Harry Cole. The best, bar none. I'll drink to that.
Best what?
The best bugger on the West Coast.
Look, Mark, you see him? The man with the hearing aid. He's following us all around.
3 people were murdered.
It had nothing to do with me. I mean, I just turned in the tapes. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I've been involved in some work that I think will be used to hurt these 2 young people. No, we're responsible. I'm not responsible. How'd you get this phone number?
We prepare a full dossier on everyone.
It's terrific. The bugger got fucked, eh?
Do you have secrets, Harry? I know you do. Tell me about yourself. Your secrets.
I don't have any secrets. Don't get involved in this, Mr. Cole. Those tapes are dangerous.
To go with the flow.
No. Your show. So you tell me, and I will do it.
I kind of would rather talk about the conversation first.
Mm-hmm. That seems the way I was going, so that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine we could cover everything, but if something's going to get dropped off the wayside, it should be the lesser movie.
Yeah. So do you want to, is this going to be just one episode then, or are you doing it as 2 separate recordings, or what are you feeling?
It'll depend on how the conversation goes.
Got you.
We'll see where it goes, because I don't want that to be constrained, because I know you're very ordered. Obviously, I am already recording. You have not graced this show with your presence since June 2020.
You're joking.
So I will not ask you what you've been up to since then. Go listen to the 8,000 episodes that Duncan McLeish has released on the Teapots Collective and whatnot.
What did we do back then?
That was Bubble Boy.
Was that? Oh, Jesus Christ. This is why we ended up in a pandemic so long. I jinxed it.
Well, no, because, I mean, we were already kind of there. So we went going backwards from the last time you were there, just episodes released by the show. So Bubble Boy is not at fault. Before Bubble Boy, Liam Rafferty and I covered Waterworld.
Oh, it's 100% Liam's fault then.
And before that, Witch and I did 12 Monkeys.
Let's blame Witch. That sounds good.
And then before that, there was Escape from LA and Mad Max 2.
Yeah, Escape from LA might have been the cause. I'm just saying it's not the Wuhan district of China. I think it may have been that caused coronavirus. Because, I obviously haven't heard that episode since it dropped. So, I can't remember if we were like that. Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of months, but we'll all be out of it soon, or what? I don't know. It does feel like June 2020, we were less than 3 months into lockdown at that point. So over here anyway. So that's just kind of surreal. We're spitting distance now to the kind of second full year of the world not being, well, it's certainly my world not being as it was prior to March 2020. So yeah, I would love to say it's been a learning curve, and it took me a while to acclimate to it. But it turns out, if you watch a lot of movies and record a lot of podcasts and aren't the most sociable person on the planet, a lockdown isn't the worst thing. Like the best thing, and I mentioned this recently on an episode of Duncan and Bo, and I can say this because my wife doesn't listen to any of the recordings that I do, but every Boxing Day in the UK, so that's the 26th of December, for the Americans that don't do Boxing Day, we always go to the in-laws. So Christmas Day spent in my house, with me and the wife and the kids, and no one else. and I love it. It's my day of getting absolutely wasted and cooking. And turns out the drunker I get, the better I am a chef.
Oh, nice.
So I don't know if there's a correlation there, but it's been proven the last 3 years, so we're sticking with it. But on Boxing Day we go to the in-laws, and it's maybe my least favourite meal of the year. And it's not because they're not nice people. They're very, very nice people, and it's not because they're like, you married my daughter. It's none of that. They genuinely love me to bits. It's just I can't be bothered. I have to smile, and I have to laugh at every joke, and I have to pretend that what they bought me I really like. And that to me is more exhausting doing that than it is running a marathon. So not this year, because this year's Boxing Day everything was back open for a small time window for us to go and celebrate, and it was fine. But the year before we did it digitally, and it was the best Boxing Day in like 15 years. I fucking loved it. I suppose it is worth kind of swinging out here that I'm not entirely sure who came up with the idea for this particular episode, but I'm very excited to do it because we're covering, if we're talking thrillers, it's in my top 10 thrillers of all time. I think it's absolutely incredible, and a movie I would have paid fucking cold hard cash down on the table in a wager with someone that you'd already covered. I can't believe you're this far into your show and you have not covered the conversation.
Well, I made some false steps early on, I think. Well, I don't know about false steps, but
Bubble Boy.
I learned there was possibly some movies that I wanted to save for particular people, and they are there. You were within that group, and
nice.
But I did something, very early on. I think within my first 5 episodes, I covered the parallax view with a wonderful person, but they had very little interest in discussing the things in parallax view. So, movies started kind of going like, oh, you don't want to talk about the MK Ultra program and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you don't want to talk about politics. Okay. All right. Okay. Yep. We're going to push things like Doctor Strangelove and They Live and The Conversation and The Thing and other things like that. A little kick that stone a little bit down the road.
That's not necessarily a bad thing. I am very early in the tenure of one of the other podcasts that I do, the aforementioned Duncan and Bo Come Correct. I brought this one to Bo. Bo had never seen it. And this would have been 2015, I think. And he'd somehow skated through life having never seen The Conversation. And I was like, I can't remember what movie he picked for me, because that was back when we were doing our Versus series. So we both picked a movie within the same genre that the other one hadn't seen. And at the end, we would essentially debate each other as to who had the better suggestion. And whatever he picked, I crushed. I crushed like a tiny little insect with The Conversation. And Bo seemed surprised by that. And I was like, it's Francis Ford Coppola, right? Like, just when he's about to hit Godfather status, right? And it's Gene fucking Hackman, like coming off The French Connection. At what point did you ever think I wasn't going to win? It seems like incredibly naive. Either that, or you genuinely thought your movie was one of the best movies ever made. Oh, what, you didn't? Well, suck it.
Take your lumps.
So it really is. I mean, it's a movie that I don't revisit like a huge amount. Probably because I don't ever want to sicken myself from it, but it's a movie whose kind of tangled tendrils have essentially influenced cinema moving forward. It was interesting because when I posted I was watching it last night, one of the people on my Facebook page had commented back and said, makes a great double bill with Blowout, which it duly does, De Palma's Blowout. But the reason it makes a great double bill with Blowout is because both movies, Blowout and The Conversation, are essentially retellings of Blow Up. So from the 60s. So they're kind of quasi remakes, so to speak. So yes, that's why they pair really well together, because they're basically based off the same movie. So there we go.
So if it didn't, there would be a problem.
Yeah, 100%. Although I say a lot about. Yeah, I mean, like I imagine a lot of people will be like, "Well, De Palma, I get it, because De Palma just rips off other people, but Coppola," and I'm like, "Yeah, Coppola can be influenced by surprisingly amazing movies as well." It's weird, that, isn't it? It's almost as if the industry continually remakes things over and over and over again.
Almost. It's
Almost.
Time is a flat circle, man.
Are you drinking tonight?
No,
Or
but
today,
I am otherwise altered.
Right.
I will
Yeah,
say
say no more.
it's medicinal in my state. And
That's so medicinal, but not fully legal.
no, it's
Or
like
does that?
if you get caught with under the metric. Okay, I'm not going to do the conversion, but you can have up to 3.5 ounces, and it's a minor fine.
Yeah, like we still use like ounces over here. I know we claim to be metric. I know that this country particularly likes to claim that it's metric. But if you go into a bar, you order a pint. You don't order a litre. You know what I mean? Like we drive miles, not kilometres. And if you're asking about dick measurement, always in inches. So there you go. And kind of celebration for my return back on your show, I bought myself a large can. I believe you call these tall boys in your country. Oh. I bought myself a tall boy of Brewdog's Mr. President.
Ooh, perfect.
So I'm themed, matches up, and it's quite strong actually. That I didn't realize when I bought it. It's 9.2%, which is quite strong for a beer. And I'm chasing it up with a whiskey because then I like my whiskey, and if I'm chatting to you about anything, I like to have a little whiskey because it makes me feel sophisticated.
Yeah. Well, here I've got. You're gonna hear it great for podcasting, but I've got one shot left.
Oh, dude. That sound right there is like close to orgasm, as you can get in an audio format, because that's a cork coming out of a whiskey bottle, which means that wasn't cheap. That's the rule. If it's a screw cap, cheap as fuck. If it's got a cork, means someone spent a bit of time in it. Yeah, there's nothing worse than just go pour myself a whiskey and then you hear the the cat being screwed. You're like, return that, please.
You hear the plastic crunch.
Yeah, oh god. I was trying to think where it was. Not that I'm throwing shade at him because I love him a bit, and he allowed me to stay at his house. But when I visited Danny Troutson from the Midnight Horror Show over in Virginia, I spent a couple of nights at his. In my whistle stop tour of Virginia, which turns out is full of, well, back then particularly, and I think more so now, full of people wearing red hats with white writing on it with slogans that I couldn't read from a distance. And he had Jim Beam, and like in Scotland, Jim Beam only comes in glass bottles, but turns out in Virginia comes in plastic bottles, which fucking blew my mind. I was like, is that like a hip flask size plastic bottle of Jim Beam? And he's like, hell yeah. And I was like, I will say no more. I will not say another word. In my country, you'd be fucking shot for that. So yeah, each to their own.
Right. I drank out of a lot of plastic liquor bottles in high school, but now, I believe our friendship was the turning point, and marrying into my wife's family, who, like, her dad always drank really cheap beer but really expensive liquor.
That's the way to do it. That's like, I'm not saying he's from Scotland, but there's Celtic blood in him, because that's the old country. The old country is beer is purely there to fill up the spaces in between the good liquor. So
yeah. So In honor of you and in memory of him, here we go. There's my last shot for until I go. There's a state liquor store about 10-minute walk from my house. So.
Oh, right. So beer not state mandated, but liquor state mandated for you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can get it. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's also not too far from where the beer comes from, but.
That's not too bad. That's not too bad.
But,
but is it like separate? Is it like so as in like you could go to, I'm trying to use American terms here, you could go like to a Walgreens, for example, and there would be beer there, but unless they have a liquor license, you can buy liquor there.
As far as I'm aware, sometimes they will make, I don't know if you want to say watered down, but you can get different proof. I think it's like 35 or 40% Jim Beam at some grocery stores and whatnot.
Got you.
Goes over a certain limit. Although here, I'm always talking about Columbus. We have, I think, over 30 beer breweries and a handful of liquor distilleries. So I think the allowed percentage of beer, and that's part of why Brewdog opened their first American.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Was I think they raised the limit to 25 or 30% for beer.
Yeah.
So
that's a no-brainer for them. Because some of their stuff gets like almost face paralyzing, which I'm not sure if that's a conscious decision on their part, but like you don't fuck around with Jackhammer. Like Jackhammer's not even their strongest beer, but if you have two of them, your legs are fucked. The rest of you is fine. You can hold a conversation fine, but your legs don't be planning to go anywhere or do anything that involves kind of coordination. So,
yeah. Nice stuff. But yeah, so there, I had my little drink with you. I think it's talking about the conversating about the conversation, and Francis Ford Coppola and Gene Hackman and 1974 and thrillers like this. I think you have to have a little bit of liquor. I should have planned ahead of time.
It's the weird thing about this movie, and we do have another one in the wings, so to speak. But the weird thing about this one is how incredibly sobering the whole thing actually is in terms of the subject matter, because it's basically your privacy. So and how like we all think we have it, but we actually don't. And even back in '74, that was a themed talking point, and nowadays even more. So like we're in a point just now. In fact, I think I saw someone post on social media, I'm trying to think, this was like maybe 2 days ago, this was on Twitter as well, urging people to stop filling out those, what's your name, what's your favorite food, where was the place you went to school, what's your best friends, like all this, basically saying this is all you're doing is just giving a ton of private information that a hacker or bot or scammer can then use against you later on when they send you a message on an email that seems a bit more personal. And I'll be honest, it wasn't anything that I'd ever actually overtly considered per se, like on that level. There are other things that you are like immensely skeptical of, but I hadn't ever really considered it to that level. And then obviously there's an incredible scene in this movie where the technology is so innocuous that when a pen is given to Hackman, he doesn't actually question for 1 second from the person that has been given it from that this could actually be something that could be recording him. And that was then. And technology has shifted quite a bit since then. Ray-Ban just now currently selling sunglasses that connect directly to Facebook. Like why anyone would fucking want that is beyond me. So I'm just going to take my glasses off and put them at the side of my bed, and now someone can hack into them and watch me sleep or know exactly where I am when I'm not in my house. to go in and steal my possessions? Or was that the password that I typed in on my keyboard to enter my work laptop? Or was that the PIN number I used to access my account from an ATM? And like it's just like Rayman's like, it's a brand new day, and I'm like, yeah, for stealing everyone's information. So yeah, they're all at it. There's a great story. I know we need to talk about the movie, but there's a great story. I once got told at a data convention that I attended. My job, not giving anything away for it because I don't want to bore you all. My job involves data, essentially, or like I will use data as an innocuous sort of catch-all term, right? And I went to one of these conferences, and they were talking about different uses of it and different applications. And the guy had talked about a story that he'd read when he was in the States about. It was on. I want to say it was in. This is when I get all wrong. I want to say it was in Chicago, but I may be wrong. But at their airport in Chicago, there is a Pizza Hut, and Pizza Hut is one of those large displays that you can order all your food, so you don't actually physically have to speak to anyone. Which the introvert in me loves that, but I'm also fully aware that it's done away with someone's job, and I want everyone to have a job, so it's like a catch-22. But this person went up, and the screen at first had like a very pleasant sort of pictures and descriptions and all the rest, and it malfunctioned when they were, this was a woman, malfunctioned when they were inputting stuff, and they got the code behind the pictures that come up on the screen, and what they read was chilling. So what it said was it was actually profiling you from the point that you went there. So it was checking to see if you were male or female. The reason it was doing that is if you were male, it was going to push fatty foods on you, and if you were female, it was going to push more health-based foods. It looked at approximating your age, and then the most disturbing thing out of everything, it actually looked to see if you were smiling or not. So if you were actually happy. And this was all data collated in there, which would then anticipate what it could sell you or upsell you in your Pizza Hut meal. And the fact that we're going back years now, the fact that that technology exists is fucking terrifying, Daeron. And it makes you wonder, like when you send a Snapchat, how much of that's been read about where you are, what sort of mood you're in, what filters you're using, what's in the background, what's in the box. You know what I mean? There's a lot of this stuff being calculated. And back in '74, it's interesting to see someone like Coppola, who, and we've got to stress this, right, in terms of its placement, right? Francis Ford Coppola, '74, right? So he's at this point being kind of groomed, so to speak, in terms of the greater understanding of cinema. He's one of the, like, essentially the new breed of Hollywood, they called him, beside him and people like William Friedkin. These were the guys that were going to take things to the next level. They were going to push things to, the next realm of filmmaking. From all the old guard, we were going to get the new guard. And essentially the conversation is the movie that he makes in between Godfather and Godfather Part 2. But he does this one the same year as Godfather Part 2. And he does it kind of on the fly. This is a quick movie for him to churn out. But would, like when we look back over these movies, people don't always jump to the conversation. But this one won the Palme d'Or. It was nominated for Oscars and did very, very well. And like you mentioned in your intro, stars Gene Hackman, who'd just done The French Connection with William Friedkin, which was a huge fucking movie. So it's so interesting to think of Coppola being this director who at one time was seen as being, the future of Hollywood, working with arguably one of the greatest actors of all time during his, once again, arguably his like strongest time in cinema, his murderer's row of films. But because it's not like The Mob, and because it's not like full of like uber violence or Vietnam or anything like that, this one's kind of been lost to the ether as a kind of slow burn thriller with not a lot of action. But But this is more terrifying to me than watching like Apocalypse Now. Like, because I am never going to be in the army. I'm never going to be stationed somewhere else or have to deal with the trauma of that. But I use devices every day that didn't exist then that are more likely to do what the devices in this movie do all the fucking time without thinking about it. And that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, I'm reminded of it. I probably haven't watched this since around when you were telling Bo to watch it.
Oh, yeah.
But it was wonderful.
Had you seen it before that?
I had. Well, once or twice. It was on... It comes up on Turner Classic Movies. I don't know if you get that channel or that network.
We don't over here. I'm aware of it. Yeah, I'm aware of TNT. Like, TNT would have been something else over here. So it would have been given through a different channel. It's how I used to watch WCW back in the day. Okay,
well, TNT and Turner Classic are separate, but same family, same original owner. So Turner Classic Movies is pretty much all movies. Sometimes they play shorts or old things from the 50s, but you recently covered Menk.
Yes.
Which is that Teapots, or is that Opera Omnia?
That's it. That was Opera Omnia. So that was our final movie in the Fincher catalogue.
His grandson, I think, or his nephew, is one of the movie hosts on there. Sometime his name's Ben Mankiewicz, and but anyway, they'll do things. They always do Noirvember, and they always do all the old and new scary movies from the silent Phantom of the Opera up to, I mean, now it's, classic movies from the 80s and things like that. So
we're sold, Daeron, we're sold.
When they were playing The Thing, and then Night of the Lepus, and then Dracula, and just whatever. So it would pop up on here, I think, around the same time that they did something like Parallax View or The Third Man or some other thriller that I know those aren't all thrillers, but, that I'm totally spacing on right now.
Yeah.
But they have good...
But that's cool. That's cool that you would get the opportunity to see a movie like this there, if you know what I mean. So, like, that's the idea that sort of movie would be playing, like, on a service that people would have access to, as opposed to being buried somewhere. And we live in an age just now where movies are constantly being rediscovered by people that are too lazy to seek them out. That's like every time I see, like, one of these film website things coming back to, we recently found or we recently rediscovered. No. The movie's been there. And it's been available. Like, a rediscovery is something like the 3-hour black and white cut of George A. Romero's Martin, which has recently been discovered buried in a university. That's a rediscovery, right? But when you're saying, we recently discovered a movie like The Faculty, for example, it's been available. It's been out there for a while. What you're trying to say is you watched it for the first time in a while and you really liked it. You don't rediscover it. You know what I mean? It's terminology that drives me up the wall. But the conversation is one of those ones. I would love to be able to sit down and watch this with my wife, for example, but she just has a memoriam on, like the age of certain movies that she'll just not entertain at all, and anything kind of pre-1980 she just won't do it. And I'm like, it's the best, like, the 70s is arguably the best decade for cinema ever, and she's like, I don't care. And I'm like, cool, fine. So I sit and watch these movies myself in a darkened room, usually with the aforementioned whiskey, and I get myself into the feel and the vibe. Simpler time, longer movies, more story and more character driven. But guess what? That equals a better movie. I don't know what it is. Like, so much tension for a movie that really doesn't, like, it doesn't really give you any of the beats, and also doesn't really show you anything. Like the death in this movie that's revealed towards the end, which, to be honest, all those pieces like really come together in the last 25 minutes. But the death of the Duvall character is how he imagines the death of the Duvall character, not how he actually physically sees it with his own eyes. So he pieces it together from a conversation that he hears using a wiretap, and then he fills in the blanks there. So you don't. That's kind of it might be the thing that kind of throws people off about this movie, but you don't actually. The terror that you get from this movie, the tension you get from this movie, is because you are Gene Hackman in this movie, and you're his paranoia all the way through it, and you are with a character who's so guarded and so restrictive of what he does and who he interacts with and how he operates, that by the time he realizes that he's been played, arguably for the second time, because there's a story, and we'll get to it in the review, there's a story about how he fled New York before because of something similar, that he gets played again the same way. You could argue that maybe the events of the New York make him more guarded, so he's more kind of set in his ways on how he operates, but he still at the end of it ends up in exactly the same place as he did before. And he either lives in the misery of not knowing how he's been compromised, or he moves again. But like, if you're moving twice because you've been compromised twice, there's a chance it's going to happen the third time. So are you ever really safe? And I kind of love that. Also, what's happening to him is not the worst thing in the world at the end of this movie. It's what he's doing to other people. So he's tasting his own medicine, but you see the effect it has on his life compared to the effects it's had on others. So it's immensely fascinating. I suppose at this point, you'll just want to talk about the movie now, Daeron.
Oh, no. I mean, we should probably talk about it more than we did Return of the Living Dead. If you
I can't even remember. I can't even remember. Did we do that on your show?
I think we called the episode We Almost Talk About Return of the Living Dead. And we just talked about other shit for about 3 hours.
That was smoke on that episode.
Oh, yes. You can't get anything
that's
done
fine.
with smokes
That's
on
fine.
the episode.
Yeah, that's why. So the conversation, right? Essentially, it revolves around Gene Hackman, who's a character called Harry Cole, and he is private investigator / snoop, and we joined him at the start with this incredibly difficult surveillance mission where they're trying to capture audio in this open area at lunchtime, surrounded by people, with a man and a woman who are walking round this courtyard in a way where they feel that they'll not be able to be surveilled, recorded, etc., etc.
You know, that was Harrison Ford's screen test.
Really?
If you've dove. I don't know if you dove into the special features any of the times you popped it out. But yeah, Harrison Ford originally tested for that male character. And there's a lot of old zoetrope pictures or whatever Coppola's company is called, little snippets. Yeah. And his screen test was doing that scene with what's her name, Cindy Williams, who does play Anne in that part. Right, yeah. But yeah, Harrison, they did the whole around the thing. It's about 6.5 minute long scene. And
wow,
Coppola was experimenting with a stationary camera on that.
Yeah.
And Cindy Williams originally screen tested for the part later played by Terry Garr.
Yeah, because a lot of people, I think there's a lot of people out there that just assume that Harrison Ford, didn't do anything at all until Star Wars. There's just a misconception that he hadn't already worked with. He hadn't just bounced from working with Francis Ford Coppola to George Lucas, arguably two of the biggest directors of the 70s. He was doing fine, is what we're saying. He's doing okay. He's got a great part. He's brilliant in this. Everyone's brilliant in this. But essentially, Hackman's character is trying to record this audio. He's been approached because he can get things done. And he's got this elaborate way of doing it. And for the first maybe third of this movie, Harry is being very, very, very cautious, but he's trying to sort the audio. And this is where comparisons we mentioned before to things like Blow Up or Blow Out come into play, because there's more detail gleaned as he does more work on the audio in this one. So to begin with, there's whole sections that aren't there, but so you get one view of what the conversation might be, ergo the name, and then he pieces more together, uses more of his own kind of handmade techniques and whatnot to piece more until he gets an audio file that he can return to his employer, who's purely known as the director, as played by, he doesn't come into much later in this movie, Robert Duvall, and he blink and you will miss it role. Robert Duvall was huge in the 70s, so like for him to take this role, and he has very little dialogue and very little presence in the movie, is kind of incredible. At what I think on one level it shows Coppola's clout at this point, kind of post The Godfather, but also I think on some level maybe shows a little bit of this movie wasn't made for the most money and was kind of put together kind of relatively quick. I mean, this is a movie that cost about $1.5 million. So it was kind of fun. So like, there's a huge speaking performance by Robert Duvall, probably because they couldn't afford them. But yeah, so you've got that. So that's the first kind of third of the movie is that level. In the background, Harry Cole himself is incredibly paranoid. This is a guy who is regimented to the degree. His colleagues know like absolutely nothing about him. He has a girlfriend that also knows pretty much nothing about him. He lives in an apartment which is sparse, doesn't appear to have anything, doesn't really like to answer the phone, doesn't give out his details to anyone, is super paranoid that his landlady left a birthday bottle of booze. This is where me and Harry Cole switched like completely into polar opposites. Someone leaves me a free bottle of booze in my house, I don't care how they got in, I am thankful for it. But like the fact that she knew it was his birthday perturbs him. The fact that she had an extra key perturbs him. So he's a guy who's very, very guarded and very shielded. You get some explanation later on. As the movie moves into the second kind of act, the second third, it's mostly kind of giving you a bit more of the details that you don't know about Harry in the background, plus his interactions with Martin, played by Harrison Ford, who works for the director, who's kind of pressurizing him and just give me the footage and give me the recordings and all the rest. We'll give you the money. You don't need to meet the employer. You know, just give it to me and everything will be fine. And we get a bit of his backstory and his interactions with the Bernie character, who is so Weasley in this movie. He thinks he's getting the upper hand. I love this because he thinks he gets the upper hand with the pen in the old pocket. But what he doesn't understand is that, you know, yeah, that's a cool trick. And, you know, it reminds Harry to be a bit more guarded. But there's an infamous story about Harry's background in New York, that he did some work for the district attorney. I don't know. You guys have weird names for things. For the DA. And it involved recording conversations between the then president and his accountant, which no one could have recorded, and no one knows how he did it. But the end result was the accountant and his family were murdered after it. So you're kind of given this idea of, well, that's why Harry left New York to start up his own business and whatnot. So you get a bit of this background information. Then the last third of this movie is basically, he's pieced together the audio, he's met the director. Coppola is so smart in this one because Cindy Williams, who plays Anne, we never find out the relationship to the director, to Duvall at all. It's assumed that it's potentially his wife, but there seems to be quite an age difference there, so it could be his daughter. They never expressly tell you, and Coppola himself wanted that ambiguity as to what the relationship was. But ultimately, this movie finishes with Harry being used the same way he was used in New York, and it's not the way you think. The way the movie's kind of set out, the hypothesis of this one is that the director is going to murder either his wife or the man that's stooping his wife. And it turns out it's actually all an elaborate plan, most likely set up by Martin to lure the director into doing something silly so they can take him out and then make it look like an accident. Very, very similar to Blowout, and once again, like Blow Up. And Harry's the only witness because he has the audio, and there's nothing really he can do about it. Oh, and yeah, by the way, in case he does, the end of this movie ends with one of the most horrifically traumatizing scenes in cinema history about pure fucking paranoia. There are absolutely no way someone like John Carpenter, when directing the thing, did not watch The Conversation. Because the kind of subtle nuance of, you know, like, I'm just going to check here, I'm going to use all my tools. Oh, they recorded me, but I can't find the bug. Look at my apartment now, and all I've got left is my saxophone, is kind of haunting. So that covers the kind of synopsis of it. But I want to get into the guts of this one, Daeron, because this one's all about surveillance, and you could step this out one step further, certainly in the other movie that we've watched. But I'm trying to work at the chronology here. This is before Watergate, isn't it?
This is really close to Watergate. I think it came out in theaters a couple months before Nixon resigned, or a couple months before Watergate really broke. Yes. Gotta go see The Conversation.
Can all of this? You've now got this. You've now got this idea in my head that like Nixon like finally came clean as press and promotion for The Conversation. Go and see my new movie, The Conversation.
You want to talk about tapes?
Well, it's weird not to look at it from that way, because Blow Up, that we mentioned earlier on, Blow Up is about pictures. It's the photographer that takes a photo that, you know, he needs to magnify and check. There's something in that photograph that's going to give him information to solve the mystery. And we don't do that with any level of audio media until Watergate. And then it's, you know, like all of a sudden the tapes are really important, and, you know, there's countless movies of people delving into recordings of other people, which comes right off the back of that. So it kind of makes me wonder if it was one of those things like when Scream first came out, people just didn't think the phone was a scary thing at all. And then it did become a scary thing. If people just thought that having your voice recorded or not being aware that you were being recorded was just a blasé sort of very neutral thing. And then all of a sudden after Watergate, everyone was like, oh, fuck, they're listening to us! We're all fucked.
We're all fucked. What did you say yesterday? I don't remember. And there are some more references, I think, to Nick. Somebody on the news is talking about Nixon avoiding the State of the Union address.
Yeah.
In one of the scenes. And then Bernie, when he's doing his drunken brag thing about, you know, I'm the best on the West Coast or the East Coast.
Yes.
All that stuff. He said that about 12 years ago, which would be, you know, depending on when they shot the film, somewhere around the 1960 presidential election, I would think.
Yes.
And that he's like, I don't want to tell you what party, but I followed a guy around everywhere he was. I recorded it. And, you know, he lost. And for those who don't know, that was Richard Nixon who lost in that election.
Oh dear. If at first you don't succeed, like, just bolster things up, change the system, and crush your enemies like bugs. Yeah, that's a Nixon story in a nutshell. Because there's that infamous story about them. Like, did they not? Him and JFK did a debate against each other, and
yeah,
depending on how
televised debates,
yeah, depending on how you consumed it, you had a different opinion. So if you listen to it, like, i.e. the radio or whatever, Nixon come off better. But if you watched it on TV, He was apparently sweating a lot and looking generally shifty, which people don't want in their politicians. And the court of public opinion declared that he lost from a visual standpoint. And it's very important because, like, we're obviously in an audio medium, but like even nowadays, people are now doing podcasts and video. I'm contemplating myself, in a video kind of medium to present that. And one of the things they teach politicians nowadays is how you have to be incredibly savvy in front of the camera. Like, people don't really take in absolutely everything you say, but your body language they do. So if you're it's one of the reasons that like people are like, Trump's trustworthy, because he, like, if you look at him, he keeps giving you the OK symbol regardless what he says. His hand is constantly OK. It's okay. And that drumming of that constantly is positive kind of affirmation that what he's saying is correct without actual listening. If you listen to what he's saying, he's talking gibberish. It's all bollocks. It's all nonsense. It contradicts what he said 2 minutes before. But the body language, the confidence in the body language and the way he's presenting that is in such a manner that when you finish watching it, you feel positive about the messaging. And in this particular thing, because we're working with the audio format, like what's kind of clever about it is using that as a technique is Harry is piecing together what he thinks has happened from the audio that he's listened to. So when we first start hearing the sound bites, Anne's communicating with the guy that she's with, and it's very much it looks like they're having an affair. Everything's set up that way. So when he conjures in his head what that conversation looks like, it's kind of loving. And there's something about it. There's not necessarily an intimacy, but there's something close about them. But by the time he gets the entire audio at the end and he starts to piece together what actually is happening, when he replays those scenes again, the body language between the two people is completely different. And it's the difference between hearing like audio recording of someone and a video. Like, I think a lot of people, when we went into lockdown, thought that when they were on a Zoom call, people wouldn't realise if they were jerking it. And turns out there's plenty of footage out there online of people unwittingly, and I've done quotation marks that you couldn't see there because this is an audio format, just getting down and dirty with their penis. And that's because he didn't realise that technology's moved on now, and it isn't just a conference call. It's a video conference call, which means video, which means you need to have your dick in your pants, or at least below the camera and your hands on the table. So yeah, there's an aspect about that that's really quite clever, but I think prescient as well, because like if you're saying that's in or around the time that Nixon finally, comes clean and resigns and whatnot, this is like, it's a scandal that is a blight on America. Still to this day, it's still like there's like things like over here we have a particular political scandal just now called Partygate.
Is that where all the references to cakes has been coming? I can't keep up. If cakes I figured beer. I figured it was associated, but
yeah, it's cakes and beer mostly. But the fact that gate is at the end of it, like, speaks to the level of the pop culture nature. The reason that Gate is in Watergate is because that's the name of the hotel. So the fact that like anyone would be like, oh, this is like Pizzagate, this is Partygate, when that makes zero fucking sense, because none of that it just becomes part of the scandal, part of the way that people disseminate information, and also at the same time impart information to other people. It's really easy to call a scandal a gate, even though that gate means nothing. Like, it really, really doesn't. In fact, if anything, like a gate, as in what a gate actually is, the analogy of like a scandal getting out a gate doesn't make sense at all. It's a poor choice of words. So, but like the fact that is in the background, people are fully aware of it, is dominating the media, and then you get this film that comes out specifically aimed at people recording other people's audio conversations against their will or knowledge. It's kind of genius. And once again, it makes me think like Francis Ford Coppola, he's got a scatty career, and let's be honest, he hasn't really made anything worth note since Bram Stoker's Dracula. There was a time period there. incredibly dangerous director to the establishment. You'll have to watch Apocalypse Now to understand that. But you're watching things like the Conversation, you're watching things like The Godfather. The Mob is kind of portrayed in a romantic version, yes, but also in a version that I imagine the Mob weren't happy about at the time. Nowadays, yeah, but back then, probably not. So, ballsy fucking director to go out there and do a movie like this. But I think it has clout because this is one of these things where there's stakes, isn't there? All the way through this movie, you're not aware of the stakes until right at the very end. When you're first introduced, this is just an audio recording of a conversation where you think a woman's having an affair. And so you're like, yeah, the husband should know that. God damn it. And as the further you go down, at that point you start to realise that things aren't as easy as you think. And actually, privacy is something that we should all be entitled to. It's kind of clever how it plays out.
And speaking of keeping your... an idea or keeping what's in frame in mind, we have to talk about how pretty much every shot starts out with something that could be a beautiful photograph framed on the wall, cinematography by Bill Butler. Who,
oh, dude, this movie is so beautiful.
That and this pretty much single piano music by what's his name, David Shire.
Yeah, the score in this one's kind of great, and because there's a kind of combination between not only just like this kind of, it's almost, and it works with the saxophone later on. There's a kind of almost conspiratorial piano hook in here, which I kind of, piano is great for. It's a very versatile instrument. It is the instrument of spy movies. Like, I know some people will know it's big band, listen to James Bond. I'm like, it's not really. Like, when I think about, like, a private investigator, I think about film noir. And if I think of an instrument that best sums up film noir, it's the piano. So the fact to kind of come back to that, but then you add this kind of bluesy, jazzy saxophone that, you know, we have our main character Harry, you know, plays along with. I love that as well. Like he's not actually, he's playing along with what other people are playing. He's not composing his own music because he's not that guy. He's not a creative in that manner. He's, you know, he's recreating the sounds that someone else has made as opposed to creating his own sounds, which is just another little level of, that's very clever, Francis Ford Coppola. You should do this for a living, this directing thing. Maybe you'll get an Oscar one day. You know, it kind of all ties into that. But it's got the classic suspenseful, whimsical, and quizzical sort of piano score. And like you mentioned, cinematography. Like, I can't stress, 70s movies can look one of three ways. They can look kind of soft focus, which is the tool that De Palma mostly used in the 70s. They can look very gritty, grainy, and kind of ugly. I'm thinking things like Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, something like Miss 45, you know, like all the exploitation stuff. Or you get this, which is, yeah, this is the as good as cinematography we'll get in this decade. And you can look at movies, the classic movies, like, you know, things like The Exorcist, The French Connection that we mentioned before, both freaking, or looking at like this particular movie, or The Godfather, where there's a, I hate to use the word, but it's handsome looking. Like you say, you could take a single shot of it, almost anything in this movie, and it's frame worthy. You could put it on your wall, and people wouldn't look at it and go, "That's an ugly picture he's got on his wall." They would look at it and say, "That's a nice bit of cinematography or a nice bit of photography." And this, like, he never had an issue with that. Like, Coppola seemed to just have like an endless supply of incredibly talented people willing to work with him. And I think that bolsters things for him when you have a movie that is essentially, it's not the most kinetic feeling movie. It doesn't have a lot of busyness about it. It's mostly shots where a camera's slowly moving to the next like level. When you have movies that are doing that sort of thing, like on some level, photography is maybe not necessarily at the forefront of what you're thinking about because it's not active. It's not like moving all the time. But then you watch this and you can instantly tell the difference between a great cinematographer and a bad cinematographer. This particular one here, Bill Butler, incredible career. Like, this guy's like laundry list of things he worked on was like fucking savage. I mean, like absolutely incredible. He worked on, you may have heard of a little movie called Jaws. You know, I mean, he may have helped out on that one. One of my favorite things about like his filmography at all, because he like worked a lot on like Rocky and stuff like that, and you can go back and check it out, and he's doing what he's doing over there, and it's fine. But one of those things that makes me smile to levels that I should not smile in terms of he did the cinematography for Anaconda.
Oh shit, did he?
Oh yeah. 97, Anaconda. You know what I'm calling that? Slumming it. So I like this idea that even at that point, he's like, fuck it. Yeah, he did Frailty as well, and Frailty is a movie that its cinematography is woefully overlooked because it's incredible because it's a gritty noir story, it's a kind of whimsical out on the prairie story, it's definitely a full-on fucking horror movie, and he captures all that. So like an incredible cinematographer who just happened to be flexing his muscles about the same time as, you get a chance to sit down and do. I don't know if he ever actually worked with Coppola again. I think this might be his. I'm now actually actively reading through his filmography, and oh shit, he did Grease, and at that point, I need to get off the internet. Not doing that anymore. So it's a beautiful looking movie, but I think, but it's slow. Camera work is slow, and it aids it, I think, because you can't be like super. There's a great film critic in the UK called Mark Kermode, who I love, and he's a big horror fan, but he's like overtly critical of horror movies, and he loves it. Exorcist is his favourite movie, and Mark Kermode says about certain things that when you're in a medium which is not an action medium, it's very difficult to portray as an action medium. So the example would be if you worked, let's say you were in a newspaper, right? And that's the movie. The movie is, got to get these headlines out and all the rest. Very, very difficult to make those shots really actiony and kind of punchy because it's mostly people typing shit and then publishing it. You know what I mean? That's your if you're a one-man army, like an Arnie and Commando, very easy to make that an action movie because he's got guns, he's taking on bad guys and all the rest. The best movies are the ones that steer into the mundane nature of the subject, but find interesting ways to propel the story at a pace or give it a vibrancy that it doesn't have. And most of that in this movie comes through the flashbacks. It's, it's him sitting trying to piece together audio, but we're flashing back to busy people walking around the square, people having these conversations, music in the background. And that's the busyness. What he's doing is ass on chair, very much like me and Daeron right now, twiddling my knobs. Yeah. That's not an exciting, it's not an exciting movie, but when you fill it with other things, it becomes a very exciting movie. It's like when you watch Spotlight for the first time, and you sit and you're like, oh, it's a story about like the Spotlight article on, priests abusing people in Boston, but they work at a newspaper. I wonder how they're going to make that movie's like about 2 hours long, and it fucking flies in. And the reason it flies in is because there's always something happening. You very rarely see someone sit down typing actually typing the article out. It's all the stuff that happens in the background. Coppola understands that. Like, the medium that he's working in is one that someone would have to sit on their ass to fucking twist knobs and fix. But the conspiracy behind it is the thing that's more kinetic. So you spend more time doing the conspiracy behind it than you necessarily do the work to get to the end recording that goes out. It's a smart move.
It's all about the conversation. And yeah, it's sort of the isolation and the privacy / lack of privacy, but you know, like that's why I think
irony.
Yeah,
it's the irony. It's the irony of a guy who is so guarded about his privacy, but works in the medium where he knows how easy it is to break the sanctity of that privacy, and that's the way he is. I find that hugely fascinating. It's like that way where you hear people that work in, like I worked, my first job, I don't know if I've ever recorded and spoken about this before, so this may be an exclusive for you. My very first job when I was 16, I worked as an apprentice at a butcher's. They have that in America, don't they? They have the term butchers.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Just making sure. I didn't know if you had like some like meat cleaver or like, I don't know, because you guys go very literal with the description of things.
Animal chopper, man.
Yeah, an animal chopper dude. So yeah, I worked in a butcher's, and I worked there for just under a year. And within about a month, I realised it was not the job for me. So I moved on to doing more of the sales side in the shop, and less of the actual cleaving of meat. But what was interesting about it is my eating of meat, my intake of that. I didn't go vegan or like vegetarian or anything, but I know there was a huge drop off because I was surrounded by it all the time. Just didn't interest me. So the idea that in this movie, you've got a guy who's out there actively capturing audio, knows all the tricks, the secrets of where it is, knows how much detail can be pulled by a private investigator from letters or like details that could be found, I don't know, from banks, like any of that sort of shit, has it like under a lid. So much so that, you know, like any indiscretion where someone knows a detail sends a wave of paranoia up him. Well, the fact that his job for a living is to do that's the cause and effect. He is so aware of what he can do and the abilities that are out there for technology to be used about people in 74 that he now lives this kind of life. And you hear these stories, like nowadays we hear stories of, you know, people that go and apply for a job and they go in, they have a great interview and they've passed everything, great references, and then someone Googles their name and finds a Twitter account and they don't get that job anymore. And it's this idea of people are unaware of the history of the deeds that they do. And back in 74, relatively easy to live a life where you may have an awkward conversation, a spat with someone, a fist fight outside a bar. A year later, no one fucking knows that. You move to the adjacent town and you're fine. In this world that we live in 2022, like, employers are doing their due diligence by just Google searching your name, and at a touch of a button, they find out everything about you, and it's everywhere, and you're fucked, and you shouldn't have done that when you were 16. You should not have shat in a bag when you were 16, lit it on fire and put in your neighbour's porch. You know what I mean? That will stop you making junior assistant at the bank. I don't know, I'm making up shit. But is that level? And that's the irony of this. The irony of this is that the very tools that Hackman is so convinced that he's on the cutting edge of, he's not, because they're used against him at the end of this movie in a way that he could never fathom. He can't find the device they use at all. So they are beyond him. The people he's dealing with had that technology. They had the technology all along. So you've got to think about it. That's the fucking stinger at the end of this movie. The people that he is working for could have done this themselves.
Oh yeah,
and they didn't. He used them as the fall guy, and then as intimidation. Like, they finally show their cards at the end, and it fucking terrifies him to the point that he strips everything. He lifts floorboards, everything. Like, he's sitting in his shell, which was an apartment, which, let's be honest, was pretty much a shell anyway. And all he has is the one thing, which, to be honest, if you're a conspiracy theorist like myself, Daeron, where do you think it was? Most likely in the saxophone, because it's the only thing he hasn't destroyed. It's the most prized possession. That's where I'd put a bug. He never takes it apart and never will. And something kind of maliciously genius about the end of that movie, in a way where you see him he's a broken man. Like, Bane might have well have just come in and broke his back and left him in a dark room. Oh, yes, I am molded by the dark, Mr. Harcourt. You know, like, that's basically what they do to him. But the fact he won't destroy his saxophone is his weakness. Because that's where to me, that's where the bug is. But yeah, it's like, and so much cleverness, so much smartness, so much irony, so much, like, conspiracy, all wrapped up in one movie. But first and foremost, it's a fucking great thriller. The story itself, if you removed all that tension out, this would still be a good page turner. You know what I mean? You would still be like, oh, I want to know what this. Why did they have to film this? I need to know. I need to know. That's the genius of the conversations. It works on. You can go deep into this one for sure, and love it for that. But if you just want to approach this as a superficial, I wonder what's happening sort of movie, you will still come out this thinking it's a great fucking movie.
Oh, easily. There's stuff there for everyone, and we didn't even get into the surveillance state and all that other stuff, and his devout Catholicism, which is built on paranoia and always being watched and not wanting to hear people say Jesus Christ around you and going to confession.
Does not want blasphemy. One of the hardest things to watch for that character, knowing all that, is when he has to, like, basically break his statue of the Virgin Mary to see if there's a bug in it.
Like, it can't possibly.
Yeah, like, who would do that? But he breaks it anyway and it isn't in there, so it's all for naught, but doesn't break his saxophone. And you're like, dude, come on, play the game. But yeah, like, it's all wrapped up. Like, Harry calls there's a difference in how you write characters decade on decade. And I know a lot of people out there will listen to this and go, oh, here's old man McLeish here talking about the good old days. The 70s are a decade that existed before I was born. I was born in 81. So, they had finished and a year on top of that before I was born. But, like, I look back at cinema then, and I don't pine for it necessarily, but I appreciate what they could do at the time. Audiences were more patient. People were more forgiving, but, like, screenwriters and directors were more confident, I would say, in their ability to, right, I'm going to do a movie, it's going to be 2 hours long, and, it isn't going to really be the most action-based movie, but it's going to be a character study. It's going to be a character piece on a theme. And Harry Cole, for as little as we know about him as a character, don't know how old he is. We know that he, lived in New York, but we don't know if he's from New York. We know so little about him. By the end of this movie, we know so much about him without necessarily knowing anything about him, and that's kind of genius. You can fully picture that character without the details that we generally need to picture a character. Coppola manages to create this three-dimensional image of someone with scant detail at all. And that's a craft. That is a genuine craft that we are missing in cinema nowadays, that few directors manage to create without, like, exposition dumps. The closest you get to an exposition dump in this movie is a conversation with Bernie talking about, well, we don't know how you put the bug on the boat, but all I know is there's 3 people that died and you moved town afterwards. That's it. That's as much as you know about Harry. You know that he plays saxophone alone. He's very guarded. As far as he's concerned, he's completely a businessman, which on some level upsets Duvall when he's like that. Go and count the money somewhere else. Don't count it in front of me. You've just shattered my life, but don't count it in front of me. Which makes me wonder why you would lay the money out like that if you didn't want to count it in front of you.
Right. Bad
play, Duvall. But he's like, don't do that. I don't want to see this. But, like, he's a bit like, he says himself, when I turn the tapes over, that's it. Except in this case, because when he turns the tapes over and he's told not to go further, he goes further, and what he overhears is something he shouldn't. And as a result of that, he ends up where he ends up. It's kind of amazing. It really is. I can't stress this enough. I think if anyone was sitting down and doing a top 10 list of thrillers ever made, and the conversation wasn't in your top 10, your list is wrong. Like, genuinely, you've either never seen this movie or you don't appreciate how ahead of its time it actually fucking is. Very prescient of its time, but a scary reminder that almost 50 years on, I mean, it'll be 50 years old in 2 years' time, which is fucking nuts. But 50 years on, it's more pertinent now than it ever was. Nuts. Like, see if someone tomorrow said, I want to make a movie called The Conversation. Got to do this remake. It's going to be the Conversation. Like, I'd be like, it's so blasé now that no one would be scared of it. No one would be interested in it, because everyone now just fully accepts that when I tick a box or I agree to something on a page or on an app, they're tracking me. And that's where we are now.
It's the old joke, oh, you're worried about the wiretap. Hey, wiretap, look up.
Yeah. The thing is, before we started this recording, I asked Siri to turn on my Blu-ray lights, which is where I've got strip lighting all along the Blu-ray shelf that my microphone hangs off to record. It was like, yeah, no problem. And I'm sure someone somewhere is like that. He's going on the computer again. The question is it to record or to wank? And I won't tell you, Siri. I will never tell you. You have to guess it yourself with your non-camera fucking recording device. I hope it's non-camera. Otherwise, there's a lot of footage of me doing things I shouldn't be doing online.
I see you have been on for over an hour. It might not be wanking.
Either that, you're dehydrated. Here, go and get a bottle of water. One of the two. It's like, the conversation to me is like, it's when people talk about how great cinema is. Like, this to me is like as close to pure cinema as you get. It's like a different level. You can talk about movie making, movie craft, cinema in general, but when you're talking about pure cinema, that's the conversation. It's an easy, flawless fucking movie. Like, one of those ones where it's like, and like if you want to talk about masterpiece, The Conversation is a masterpiece, because there ain't one facet about it, one iota about it where I'm like that. It's a bad casting choice. That doesn't make sense. Everything ties up at the end in the most deliciously horrible way. It doesn't give you answers per se, but it doesn't have to, because that's part of its charm, and that's what's hoping on. So it's different, completely different level. Like, if you're putting this show with June 2020 side by side, there is a distinct difference between Bubble Boy and The Conversation, and it's more than just $500. You know what I mean?
Perfect.
I thought you'd like that.
Perfect.
Thought you'd like that.
Perfect ending to that, I think. Unless we have more to say.
Not in this one, but we did watch another movie.
We did watch another movie. So let's say, I don't know. What do you feel like being on a 2-ish hour episode or 2 1-hour-ish episodes?
It's your show, buddy. If you want to take a month off and release this as a second episode and just be like, you know what, Daeron has earned this, then let's make it a second episode. But if you're thinking to yourself, you know what, this is one of those little treats. Those treats that you have, like a cheat day. Hashtag cheat day. I've seen The Rock's cheat day. I know what he does. This could be your stack of pancakes that you have like at like 10 o'clock at night for some reason, The Rock. If this is your cheat day, shove this one in there. We can talk about this one as well.
Let's say, how about we will say goodbye for this episode.
I like it. Oh, Daeron. You know what Daeron just said to you listeners? She's like that. I've earned this. And I agree, he has. So like, give him some peace.
Tune in next time for Duncan and Daeron are the enemy of the state.
He did what we all must learn to do. You and you and you and you. Duck and cover.
I'll be right back.